Nero is my favorite Devil May Cry character. I'll talk about his backstory, combat, visual design, and music here, because I think there's a lot to it that might be overlooked. Let's do some backstory first. Before the events of DMC3, Virgil, unimportant, shows up in Fortuna Island, and fucks. Fucks hard enough to instantly have a child first try and forget about it. Said child is named Nero and abandoned to the local orphanage. He grows up to be an outcast, full of angst because of abandonment and the looks he's given, but behind all that angst and lone wolf look lies the kindest soul in the franchise. He never fully chooses a side, he follows the Order of the Sword because there's not much else to do, and his mentor, Credo, taught him the art of the motorcycle blade. The Order of the Sword isn't a traditional church because it doesn't follow God, but instead follows Sparta, some old demon on par with God who turned one world into two, and by extension created hell and earth as we know it, who then fucked around for 2,000 years before getting laid and promptly dying. The wife births twins, Dante and Virgil, but they're not important to the church and not well known, also irrelevant for now. Nero couldn't give less of a fuck. If God existed, then why the hell would he let angels like Kyrie get their families killed while demons got to roam around? As you can see, Nero is very open-minded, let's say, and also has a crush on Kyrie. His distaste for God, and by extension the church, leads him to do his own thing, which includes using a gun. A gun he put a second barrel on so he could shoot 2 bullets per bullet since regular weapons aren't strong enough to hurt demons, and it offers great range. As he's carving a sick blue rose engraving on the gun, he's informed that Kyrie was taking the orphanage kids out for a walk when demons showed up. He rushes to help, but doesn't actually use the gun. He's too scared of missing and hitting Kyrie, and no amount of confidence will let him take that shot. So he instead fights close range with Red Queen. The normal sword that the church gives its guards wasn't enough for Nero, so he turned the brake into an accelerator and maxed out the output to the point where it would fly out of a regular person's hands, but Nero can wield it. The demon he fights in the scuffle had some intellect and targeted Kyrie to create an opening against Nero and the other guards, which led to Kyrie getting her in the shoulder, Nero's arm getting slashed, the Red Queen being pushed past its limits and breaking, and one of the other guards dying. As they head home, Nero starts to feel pathetic. He hates himself for not being strong enough to protect her, and he patches up his arm and goes to bed. That night, he has a dream where a shadowy figure speaks to him. In this dream, Virgil asks Nero if he hears his soul calling out. Nero doesn't answer, telling us that he is either unhappy with what he hears, or that he doesn't hear anything. Virgil says that power is what his own soul calls out for, and Nero adopts that answer as his own. I interpret this as Nero's soul calling out for a wish to protect, calling out for something far more hopeful than power, but he doesn't think such a wish is realistic or worth answering, and something more helpful would be power to protect. He forgets this dream instantly, but it still happens, and his call for power gets answered in the form of demonic power. As the next month goes by, his arm slowly transforms from a regular human arm to this thing, which has another arm inside of it. Nero calls it Devilbringer because he's like 17, leave him alone. He tries to finish up a demon hunting job the church gave him, goes to the store to pick up a necklace, and barely makes it in time for Zoshi's latest performance. He pays his dues as Kyrie's #1 fan and leaves because
all this preaching's putting me to sleep.
But Dante shows up and kills the Pope. To quickly recap Dante, he hid in the closet as the house he grew up in burned down around him, lived as a mercenary, then killed his brother Virgil, settling in as a demon hunter before killing Mundus, who killed his mom and enslaved his half-dead brother, and now he kills demons looking for someone to give him the same thrill of a good fight that his brother gave him when they were young. His family was important to him, but he lost everything, and he blames both himself and Virgil for it. Nero doesn't know this, so he treats Dante as an assassin and goes to do his job as a church guard. In this fight, Nero learns 2 things. The assassin isn't human, and neither are a large majority of the church's guards. This first interaction paves the way for Nero's inferiority complex to Dante. Aside from Credo, Nero never had someone to fully look up to, and Dante was everything he wanted to be and more, with his sense of style being much more appealing to Nero than Credo's straightforwardness. We see Nero copy certain moves and try to incorporate them into his own style, as if to try and prove himself or feign control over the situation. which contrasts Dante, who always has everything under control. Dante leaves and Kyrie comes with a repaired Red Queen. There's demons outside which calls Nero to action for the events of DMC4, but I'll just jump to the next important bit. Nero dies. His heart stops beating and one of the church's lead scientists is to blame. In limbo, he recalls that dream from before, and yet again wishes for more power. Yamato, Virgil's devil arm, answers his call, and through Nero's power, likely heritage, is repaired. Agnus runs away, and Nero now heads towards church headquarters for answers, but not before falling to his knees as he comes to terms with what he is. Demonic power from a place he doesn't know flows through him, meaning he's part demon. He always had a hunch, but to be met with his own reflection in demon form is still a shock, especially when he canonically dies and brings himself back to life through said demonic power. Armed with a demonic arm that holds a spectral arm and a devil, what the hell? He goes to church headquarters, finds Dante, who might not be as bad as he first came out to be, fights Credo and beats him, but reveals to Kyrie that he's a demon. We don't get to see Kyrie's full reaction because she gets kidnapped, but I really don't think she cares. At headquarters, Nero has a short fight with Dante, who wonders if they might be brothers. Sparta was alive for 2,000 years and maybe he had another son or something, but the timeline didn't completely match up. The other options would be that he would be his own child, which Dante doesn't even find funny, and the third option, Virgil. Dante thinks about this while Nero heads to save the girl and fails, losing his entire body and memories to the savior, a giant statue powered by Nero's body that heads to the city to fight the demons they spawned. Nero really fucked up here, and he paid the price for it. The game fails to fully encapsulate the severity of this scenario, having his body congealed into the savior's heart and the Yamato taken from him to open up a portal to hell so they can bring demons to earth and kill them. Dante works on saving the day while Nero can't even think properly, having no idea who or where he is, nor having a body to move. He can do nothing but wait. As Dante gets closer, so does the Yamato. Having already shared a deathly scenario together, Nero and the sword have gotten quite close, and Nero starts to regain his memories slowly. He finds comfort in Dante being nearby, and feels pathetic for needing to be saved by him. He figures that even if Dante saves him, if he can save Kyrie, they're even. He failed once, it won't happen again. Despite having no mouth or body, Nero struggles and screams, though to little effect. Dante notices the slight difference in the savior's state due to Nero's rebellion and shoots Yamato, literally so that it reaches Nero. Nero then uses the Yamato's ability to separate man from devil, though I prefer to say it cuts through space and separates himself from the savior as he makes his way to the control room, where the Pope, revitalized through demon power, is keeping Kyrie hostage. He saves the girl and escapes before Dante can beat the savior, which saddens Dante a bit since he didn't get to show off, but he's just happy he found part of the family he thought he lost. Now, understanding where Nero comes from, he leaves the Yamato to him so that Nero can continue to protect people with his power instead of succumbing to the demonic instinctual thirst for more strength. Dante watches Nero kiss like the proud uncle he is, and then leaves to the main Devil May Cry facility where he orders a neon sign to be made of the same name. The sign is then mailed to Fortuna, allowing Nero to do some demon hunting work after he was done renovating the island. The events of DMC4 are then referred to as the Fortuna incident, and Nero now works under Devil May Cry, which he turns into a mobile demon hunting job. A decent amount of time after the Fortuna incident, Nero is now in his early 20s, and one of the orphanage kids shows up saying some crazy curly-haired girl is trying to find him. Said curly-haired girl interjects, saying that her hair isn't curly, and talks to Nero about the Fortuna incident. The villagers of Fortuna agreed to keep quiet about the incident, with Nero leading them, so it was very suspicious that this person knew about it. This person is Nico, Agnus's abandoned daughter who came to Fortuna to look at his research on demonic power. Nero is extremely wary, and although he fully expects to kill her because of how suspicious she is and how cruel Agnus was, his soft side is way bigger than his tough side, and they become friends shortly after, spending time together at the orphanage, which is now led by Nero and Kyrie. Nico acts as Nero's mechanic and helps him maintain his sword and gun, as well as helping with the Devil May Cry business. Overall, things are going pretty well.
I'm taking this back.
Having lost his arm and the Yamato, Nero is now incapable of using Devil Trigger. He was relying on the Yamato's power and using it half-assedly. He never truly relied on himself, and he lost 3 arms as a result. Nero, having lost what he believes was the only thing given to him, his birthright and a part of himself, rushes in to take it back as soon as he could. The first opportunity he's given is when someone who calls himself V appears in the hospital room not even a week later and asks him to fight. With the Red Queen, Blue Rose, and his good arm gone, he takes a helicopter ride to Redgrave, leaving Kyrie and Nico confused about where he went. In a rushed act of revenge, he fights against Urizen and loses, awakening to no form of demonic power or other strength. He is forced to retreat, having taken yet another loss when it was most important. Back home, with Nico's help, he gets a prosthetic arm made by studying and mimicking the way demons function, and after a month, Nico and Nero head to Redgrave again, a little more prepared this time. Unsure of Dante's status, they regroup with V and make their way to the giant tree that grew by absorbing the blood of Redgrave's residents. After making his way to Urizen a second time, Nero loses yet again, awakening to no form of demonic power or other strength. With V's help, Dante comes and saves Nero once again. Urizen escapes to where the Qliphos fruit has grown, and Dante is first to make it there. Nero was delayed because he had to fight Malthus and carry V. Despite time being crucial, Nero chooses to help V instead of rushing headfirst to Urizen. Dante beats Urizen, who then merges with V to turn back into Virgil. Virgil completely overpowers the weakened Dante and doesn't even bother fighting Nero. Dante heads back to regroup and try again, while Nero is faced with the shock of learning that Virgil is his father. Even with his enemy right there, the one that took his arm in front of him, he only stands there, knowing his weakness. He awakens to no form of demonic power or other strength, despite revenge being within reach. Nero is told to pack it up and Dante goes to finish the job, defeating Virgil's nightmares and fighting his brother. They fought plenty of times, with 2 times being the final time, but now it's time for the third and final rival fight. Mission 20 starts with a cutscene, like every other mission. When I first watched this cutscene, I was very put off by it. This cutscene and the cutscene that happened shortly before felt very weird when I first watched them. It felt forced and useless. I only really understood its importance when I fully started thinking about it. I let it play in full, then explained how I feel about it. I think a lot of the value in this scene is overlooked, and it took me a while to fully understand its importance, but it became my favorite cutscene when I did.
Nero, jump in!
Where's Dante?
He's got this! We gotta go now!
So this guy Virgil. Know him?
Vaguely, yes.
Dante said that guy's my father. What the hell's going on, Trish?
His logic is sound. I had a hunch myself.
This doesn't make any sense.
I know you hate Virgil, but you can't kill your own father!
It's true. You'd never recover from that. You saved us. You should be proud. Now you can put all this behind you.
Nico, stop the car!
No chance! After all this, are you insane?
Fine. I'll go by myself.
Hello? Nero? Is that you, Nero? Did something happen?
Kyrie. When I was a kid, I was alone. You and Kratos were all I knew. And now all of a sudden I find out I have a family. What am I supposed to do with that?
You always know which path is right and which is wrong. There's no need to doubt yourself.
Thanks. I guess that's all I needed to hear. I have one last thing to take care of. Then I'm coming home. couldn't protect Credo. To this day, I hate myself for not having enough strength. But this time is different. I swear! I'm not letting you die! This is curious.
Nero.
What form of power is this?
What the hell?
This ends right here.
Listen to me. I told you already. This is not your...
You listen, deadweight. I won't let you kill each other. There are other ways of settling your differences. I'm putting a stop to this sibling rivalry. You came all this way just for that. Virgil. V. Whatever you call yourself. Dante's not gonna die here. And neither are you. Do you have a problem with that?
Not gonna die my ass. Oh, that bitch slap nearly killed me.
If I beat Nero, then by default, I beat you. Agreed, Dante?
Whatever. I don't really care. I'm just gonna sit this one out.
When this is over, I'll make you submit. Father.
To start with, what is Nero exactly? The obvious answer is that he's weak. He's a way for the player to understand the game without being overwhelmed by Dante's complexity. The next answer is that he's the lone wolf type, edgy, full of angst, and driven by rage. My answer is that he's soft. His hatred for God stems from discontent with unfairness. He doesn't accept himself because his origin is shared by those who hurt the ones he cared about. He craves power only because he can't protect anyone without it. Nero is extremely soft. He was distraught when he thought he killed Dante. The game doesn't cover this, but the book puts a bit of detail into his personal dilemma of trying to justify killing an assassin. Nero is extremely soft. He doesn't even let his anger take over him. We never see him lash out on other people the way Dante does in the first book and his interactions with Nero in DMC5. His awakenings are more tied to his want to protect. He got his Devil Bringer because he wanted to protect Kyrie but wasn't strong enough. His first Devil Trigger was a result of him trying to save himself. With his life flashing before his eyes, he recalls a dream he forgot and reaches out for what could tie him to the shadowy figure that answered his soul's call for power. When it comes to revenge or beating demons, Nero doesn't awaken to any form of power. Despite facing the one that took his arm and overpowered Dante, he doesn't awaken anything. Recall back to when I called Nero open-minded. That was because he sees the world in a different way than the people around him. The people around him prayed to a god, but where was that god when Kyrie's parents were killed? If someone so perfect and angelic exists, why must they suffer? Everyone around him accepts Virgil's death as fact. V doesn't matter anymore, nor does Urizen. Virgil is back and he has to die. Everyone accepts this, while Nero is still thinking about V. If Virgil is both V and Urizen, then everything V said still matters, the same way that everything Urizen did still matters. That aside, Virgil is his father. Virgil abandoned him is the reason behind his demonic side, but Nero still can't bring himself to hate Virgil. Why does one of them have to die? Why can't both of them just exist together? Why is everyone pushing me away from something I have every right to be a part of? What do I do? With the situation that Nero is in, I expect him to be lost given how soft he is. I didn't expect him to call Kyrie, however. When I started seeing Nero as being soft, I saw in him what Kyrie saw in him since 4. Kyrie isn't just the girl that needs to be saved, she is Nero's reason. Kyrie was quick to accept Nero's demonic side because it doesn't matter what he is, Nero is still Nero. When the villagers are shunning him for being a demon, she's the one telling Nero outright that their opinions don't matter. She chooses kindness as an act, separating what she does from who she does it to. The villagers can be dicks and she can disagree with them, but she can still give them food. She doesn't do it for them, she does it for herself. And when it comes to Nero, she has grown up watching him in the same way he grew up looking up to her. She knows all of Nero's sides and is quick to accept new ones because Nero is still Nero. He can act angsty and rude, but he's still soft. She accepted Nero far earlier than she is even shown. With Nero being as soft as he is, it makes sense for him to go to her when it feels like way too much is happening. Nero starts to explain, but it doesn't matter. Kyrie doesn't need to know the full story. She knows just how soft Nero is. She knows what he wants is never anything bad, so she tells him to do what he wants to do. She can hear the details later when he comes home, but he needs to finish the job and get home first. With Nero in distress, Kyrie tells him exactly what he needs to hear, something only she understands that he needs to hear.
You always know which path is right and which is wrong.
After the Fortuna incident, Nero still hadn't accepted his demonic half. He would still hide his arm when he went outside, and it was Kyrie to push him to accept himself. This is no different. Kyrie isn't just telling him to act on his thoughts, but also his feelings. He is allowed to accept his father into his life. He's also allowed to accept himself fully. This time, he won't just use it for power, but as a true extension of himself, as a means to protect what's important to him. This time, he won't just be a misunderstood demon. People will be absolutely right to hate him for being a demon, but it doesn't matter. He'll endure the exile. He means it this time, whether it comes to protecting himself, Kyrie, his mentor, or his father. Even if that means he has to beat his feelings into them, he'll protect everyone. The beginning of the cutscene is there to show the disconnect between his thoughts and the accepted thoughts. The phone call is there to show that the disconnect doesn't matter, because he needs to act on his own feelings and trust himself instead of being told what to do. The final dialogue part is the weakest, and that makes it better. Nero is in his own head right now, so his words won't come out right. He'll say things that don't make sense, but the purpose is there. Don't ignore me. I'm not going anywhere. You both matter to me, and I won't let you kill each other. Even if I have to beat it into you, you will accept my existence. But not all of this can be explicitly stated. He only just unlocked his devil trigger, and he's instantly talking and fighting. He's likely still processing his thoughts and feelings, so what can he say to fully get the point across? One line and a fight to prove himself. There's already a video on visual design of DMC characters, so if you're interested in the fashion behind it, you can watch that. I'll mostly focus on the lore importance though, since I know nothing of fashion. Boots and pants are alright, nothing special to say about them. An off-white shirt under a dirty and worn sweater probably tells us that he cares about the red sweater but doesn't want to wear a ripped up shirt, so we can infer it's likely a gift from Kyrie. The necklace is likely a return gift from her as well, matching the one he gave her at the beginning of DMC4. The blue coat is pretty generic, a lot more generic than his DMC4 counterpart, but something of note is the ripped up right sleeve. This is all me making shit up because the game never talks about it, but I theorize it's probably a result of Kyrie getting upset at him for constantly covering Devilbringer up with the sleeve, so she just rips it off, and I think that's funny. The left sleeve is rolled up because he's constantly using his wrist to rev up Red Queen, and it would get annoying. It also matches both forearms being visible, which might also be why he'd roll it up. Aside from two taunts, Nero doesn't wear the hood much. Just like with the left sleeve, he's trying to accept himself and not hide anything, so he tries not to cover himself up. Of the two taunts, one has him just flick it upwards in a show of style, while the other has him put more emphasis on it. This is the BP taunt, and it gives him a damage boost the more enemies he kills after using it, so it's kind of tied to him entering flow state, I guess, somewhat similar to how Dante reaching Triple S unlocks Quad S and is his version of flow state. His hair in DMC5 is an odd switch. Why would he cut it short? His long hair had so much edgelord style and I loved it, but his shorter hair here is kind of lacking. My in-universe reason is that Nico fucked up the haircut and they had to go short. I'll talk about the DT hair in a bit, but just know that I love the long hair look for Nero and the DT hair fits him incredibly. His clothes also have a blue and red theme, similar to his DMC4 clothes, but less obnoxious. The red and blue could be there just to symbolize how he has qualities of both Dante and Virgil, as well as acting as the bridge between them. I also think red and blue adds more to Nero, with his clothes showing off red on the inside and blue on the outside. There's a cool video about red and blue in DMC, and it connects red with body and demons, contrasting blue with the mind and humanity. Building off of that, we see Nero wear clothes where red is on the inside and blue is on the outside. I take this to mean that Nero has all the power he needs inside of him, but he can't see it because his mentality is blocking him. His red clothes symbolizing inner strength and the blue coats covering up that strength as a mental block. We see the opposite of this when it comes to Nero's Devilbringer. The inside is blue because he obtained Devilbringer by accepting that he needs power if he wants to protect. With the thought as a basis, his power is formed around it, into this powerful red arm. In DMC5, Devilbringer has calmed down into this draconic arm that, while it doesn't appear as crazy and powerful as DMC4's Devilbringer, now holds Yamato inside of it. I see this visual change as the result of both Nero no longer longing to be all-powerful and the Yamato residing in the arm for so long. After the events of 5, Devilbringer is referred to as his demonic power as a whole, but I'd rather be more specific. So his Devilbringer is his spectral arms. These arms are made for grabbing, replacing his wings and assisting him in combat. It's all the utility that his previous Devil Trigger gave, and now no longer reliant on the Yamato, but instead his own power. Assuming that wings here symbolize freedom and his arms symbolizing strength, you could say that his power is his freedom. Despite losing the usual wings that Dante and Virgil have, he is still capable of flight. This is not a compromise for a lack of strength, but self-expression. When unused, these arms sit on his shoulder. This could be seen as his power having a tight grasp on him, controlling him even, but I interpret it as his power resting on his shoulder. Both the angel and the devil that tell him what to do, what gives him his strength and his freedom that at the end of the day rests on his shoulder. His to control, the choices being made by him. Despite the influence of this imaginary devil and angel, he is Nero as a whole, and his strength and freedom are his first and him second. This version of Devilbringer is also spectral instead of physical, harder to maintain and create, but in turn as powerful as his soul and essentially indestructible. He won't have it taken from him again. In DMC4, Devilbringer has a star at the back of the hand. Is it meant to be like the Untouchable or Vitality Devil Star? In concept art, it shares the untouchable color, but in the game, it's blue, and there's no blue star, not counting the poison cure star in DMC2. The star is the source of the blue cracks that Devilbringer is full of. This isn't seen in DMC5, where it shows the opposite instead, where the cracks appear to be forming from the elbow protrusion. I think the cracks weren't meant to be there and could be an imperfection, which could explain how Nero's mastery over DT helps him cover up those tracks, but not all of them, since he has yet to truly master DT so the Yamato's power leaks out. We know that Nero holds a lot of explosive power in him, probably because he's extremely emotional and the demonic power is intensified by that, so the cracks being him failing to control that power makes sense to me. Additionally, Nero's demonic power isn't really as evenly spread as Dante or Virgil's, with basically all of his power being in his arm, so it makes sense that it can't fully be contained. When talking about Devil Trigger, I am assuming that the Devil Trigger form is a subconscious view of the self, bringing up what's inside into physical manifestations of the body. Nero's DMC4 DT is pretty flashy, with a lot of protrusions but a hood on. I see this as him wanting to be acknowledged for his power, but not recognized. The only limb with a full 5 fingers is his right hand, his left only having 3 and his feet only having 3 toes. We only see this with feet for Dante and Virgil's Sin Devil Trigger, so we can infer that losing the fingers and toes means sacrificing control for explosive power, which Nero would definitely do in DMC4. His left arm has turned into a 3-fingered Yamato holder, likely giving up the control of the full 5 fingers for power in an attempt to match Devilbringer's power so the left hand isn't completely useless. Contrasting his normal clothes, his DT form has blue on the inside and red covering it, telling us that his humanity and mindset is enveloped by his demonic power in this form. This color scheme is also seen in Red Queen and Blue Rose, a sword built for fighting demons, packing explosive power that Nero modified to have it throw around even more power. Blue Rose, however, is more mind-focused, the extra barrel and rose engraving being his own custom design. One built in a demonic want for more power, and one built with his humanity in search for a safer alternative for combat. Devilbringer here is more complex and protrudes further outwards at the elbow, while also exhibiting the same wrist protrusions that we see in DMC5. It's more complex now, and empowered by Devil Trigger, allowing him to perform heavier busters. I haven't seen anyone talk about this recurring pattern in DT, despite it being very apparent in a lot of the forms. I have two conclusions that I made for this. The first is that it is very similar to random pressed Damascus steel, a type of steel with a bothersome creation process but capable of exceptional hardness and flexibility while still maintaining a sharp edge, which could be symbolic of Devil Trigger as a whole. In universe, I specifically found examples of this pattern when the body was being manipulated somehow to produce something entirely different from the original human form. It's always under the wings, it's in the different extruding parts of Nero's body as well as the insides of the SDT forms. I interpret this as devil energy given form, specifically the parts where instead of having reinforced the body part that already exists, you instead create a structure. There are still exceptions to this. Horns, Virgil's tail, Yamato's sheath, mostly parts that have been thoroughly solidified. This might be a choice for certain parts and a way of efficiency for others. For example, the inside of the wings don't usually take damage, so it makes sense to not solidify that with scales and just keep the devil energy as is. Neo's back, on the other hand, changes quite often, because he needs to manipulate his spectral arms so it might impair his movement if that part is solidified. Torso core area for SDT might just be the abundant devil energy overflowing and not being able to be fully contained. There's also these weird scarf-like things in the chin horns, which I don't really understand what it means, but it definitely looks neat. I think the chin horns are just a defining Devil Trigger form trait, similar to wings, since Dante and Virgil have them as well. Compared to Dante's offensive jagged eye masks or horns and Virgil's metal as fuck jet engines, in DMC5, Neo's looks more freeing and angelic, putting more focus on his human face rather than his demonic extensions. The wings somewhat resemble Angelo's horns, kind of contrasting how although Virgil forgot his reason in his endless pursuit of power, Neo never forgot that he only seeks power to protect, replacing the overgrown parasitic horns on his head with free wings. The DMC5 Devil Trigger form is significantly calmer, less aggressive, more bare. His face is in full reveal, no longer hidden. His feet have 5 toes. He doesn't need to sacrifice humanity for more power like he needed to in 4, so he can keep himself as is. His body shape is also more similar to his human body shape, not as bulky as his DMC4 DT. The wings are hands, somewhat similar to Gore and Shagaru Magala from Monster Hunter. The hard parts of his legs are black, while his torso's hard parts are red. His skin is now more green and less purple, still showing signs of blue. His legs in this form are very basic, with more emphasis being put on how he has 4 arms just like in DMC4, but this time, they're all his own power. His feet are so unassuming that I can't help but feel disappointed, since his busters are also more focused on his hands than his feet. I wish we got more Nero feet love, but it makes sense that he has more focus on the arms than the legs, since Kyrie acts as his feet. His hands have long claws in place of nails that instead of hindering grabs, make them more deadly. His form here is significantly less complicated than Dante's, Virgil's, or even his own DT from 4. His hair is now significantly longer, creating a contrast between his lack of power at the start and his abundance now. The underside of his head wings are now red instead of yellow, angelic white on the outside, red on the inside. From his perspective, this is almost as if he can't see the pure nature of his power because he can't see past the red front that is shown to him. He can't see his power as a part of himself because he can only see it as demonic. Red tears flow on his skin. Devil did cry? Assuming the body and mind color definitions, the red tears are there to show that the part of him that cries is the devil, in contrast to his bluish skin symbolizing humanity that is strong enough to accept the devil inside. Both of these together is what I interpret him treating both sides of himself as one. His red can cry and his blue can kick ass, but even if he has 2 separate colors and beings in him, he is one Nero. His blue skin is wrapped in red scales and comforted by blue hands that rest on his shoulders. This could be seen as fingers and interpreted as his demonic instinctual side having a hold of his human base, but his human spectral hands having an even tighter grip on his demonic side. His spine is more complex at the bottom right above his hip and at the top right before his spectral arms take over his back. His spine is a lot simpler than Dante's, but I believe speaks more to his strength than Dante's simple improvements of just adding more stuff on it. Virgil's spine is also not as dense as Nero's, though largely overshadowed by his tail. I think Nero's failures outweigh Virgil's here, because he wasn't able to get back up without Dante. His failures haven't just impacted him, but also who he cares about. To him, he might feel spineless, and in a funny way to try to better himself, he gets more spine so that he isn't weak. His ears are pointy, like elves or more likely dragons. I would love to make more conclusions about how the Sparta family has more ties to dragons than demons, but I need to read up on more Eastern Asian dragon lore. As far as I know, those dragons are known to be capable of a human form, and as far as I've seen, usually have pointy ears. To call back to that Monster Hunter reference, the game puts emphasis on what normal people call dragons, calling them wyverns, and the category of dragon being saved for true calamities. Sort of similar to how demons with more strength have more intellect, so Sparta and Mundus could have been the elder dragon equivalent of demons, which would be the wyvern equivalent. Gormagala is classified as a demi-elder. It's not dangerous enough, but is stronger than wyverns. However, if left to mature, it transforms into Shagaru Magala, a full elder dragon, just like Nero. I didn't really talk about this in the original script, but this version of Devilbringer that appears when you're doing hold or buster attacks is a very mean and aggressive look to Devil Trigger, and it shows like a lot of these jagged lines, sharp edges that's clearly meant for there to hurt. We don't quite see the like flowy pattern that we see with the regular arms, but we see these less offensive claws than the regular Devilbringer, but they're clearly there for the grabbing part, as opposed to the ones that usually hang around his arms. I think it's cool how these ones are the actual arms that grab, whereas the other ones are closer to the actual wings. And there's also this purple mist around. Purple is usually the color we see associated with Sparta, so it's cool to have him have it there, as well as on the back here there's some purple. The orange eyes I also didn't mention much. In DMC4 he had these bright red eyes, and now they're closer to orange, as if it's more pure now, not really as aggressive and power hungry as he was in 4, and more innocent than then. This version of Devilbringer mimics what his right hand does in the same way that it mimicked what his right hand did in DMC4, and that's probably what separates it mostly from his wing-like arms. I'll stop myself from describing Nero's entire kit because that would be pretty boring, but I'll show what I don't mention at the end. Devil Trigger Explosion is a great way to cancel what move you're doing and enter DT, and can be inverted by quickly inputting a direction with the left stick or WASD. There's a great video you can watch about Devil Trigger Explosion, and another video about character resources you should definitely watch. Near the Sky makes some great points about how Nero's DTE in DMC4 is him being unable to control his power, and in DMC5 it's a choice and a show of confidence. Snatch is a move Nero has always had, and it contrasts Dante. Dante's combat style allows him to dance around enemies, and he doesn't mind bringing the fight to them. As long as it's fun, he's willing to give the enemy as much as they want, because he knows he is in full control. Nero, on the other hand, isn't in full control, so he has to feign control by grabbing the enemy and bringing them to him. Snatch is also very important to Nero, since it's a move he has access to from the very beginning. Even when all of your breakers are gone, you can still perform Wire Snatch. Bringing enemies to him instead of bringing the fight to them is very important to Nero. Buster is one of the coolest game mechanics I've played with. Every enemy gets their own animation of getting their ass kicked, as well as another stronger version for Nero when he's in DT. Holding the Buster button down lets you pick up small enemies and carry them around, which is incredible. The Buster mechanic as a whole is really limiting because of how it can't be cancelled and locks you in a very long animation, but it speaks to how Nero is willing to isolate and dogpile on one specific enemy in an attempt to overwhelm and take control. Nero's busters take control away from you so that Nero can do his own thing for a while, as though Nero is willing to give up control not just from himself but also from the player. One of the sad things about Buster is that none of the Alto Angelo busters made it into DMC5, which is a huge bummer. Table Hopper is one of the very few defensive options that Nero is given. The timing for it is similar to Perfect Guard for Dante, meaning it's very last minute. The additional jumps are great for taking back the space you just gave up with the dodge. What's cool about this dodge is that it's less so Nero dancing with the enemy, but instead Nero dancing with death through the attack itself. Exceed is Red Queen's gimmick. By revving up the sword, you increase its power, with combo attacks hitting harder at higher exceed levels and directional attacks consuming the entire exceed gauge to get as powered up as possible. Since your normals deal more damage with more exceed, you are encouraged to keep your exceed level maxed out all the time, which is extremely hard to pull off, but Nero is willing to bet on those unrealistic odds. Right after an attack, you can input exceed to instantly gain a gauge through X-Act, or perfectly time a max act to fill out the exceed gauge entirely. You want to do this after every attack, so it's pretty hard to maintain, but pays off extremely well. This is a great way to show how DMC4 Nero is willing to try as much as possible doing things that are very hard to maintain just to squeeze out more power, even if it means giving up control. DMC5 Nero, however, probably has the exceed loop ingrained in his combat style, so now he does even more extra shit just because he can. With or without exceed, Nero is clearly wielding a weapon that wasn't meant to be wielded. Lore-wise, this makes sense because it's a sword with an engine modified to be on max propellant output all the time, but compared to Dante, Nero's swings are heavier and exaggerated. At times, it's as if he's being pulled by the sword, compared to how Dante at times take the lead with his sword still being on his back. The massive disconnect between Dante's careful and precise movements, with him at times leading instead of the weapon, and Nero's extreme motions constantly trading positions between the sword leading and him leading, as though he's not just fighting the enemy at hand but also himself. Comparing their forward attacks, Dante's leads with his sword, carefully maintaining a straight line in his attack. Nero, however, is at odds with Red Queen, as if he's trying to race his own sword. This isn't just a visual effect. You can't parry with Shriek the same way you can with Stinger. The way Nero's moves have him at odds with his choices speaks to his personality more than Dante's precision speaks to his experience. You can feel the emotion Nero puts in when he's dogpiling with Combo B more than you can feel with Dante's experience and precision from his quick and short actions. It's important to note here that compared to Stinger or Rapid Slash, which attack before the character, Red Queen stays behind Nero until contact, making more emphasis on Nero's aggressive fighting style that leaves much to be desired defensively compared to the rest. Nero gets more spin the more exceed he has. You can cancel the attack after the backstep to create space, like a back table hopper on command. The flames hit harder the more exceed you have. This is 2/3 of Nero's defensive options. Split is an okay grounding attack. It's largely overshadowed by Double Down, the exceed version of this, which has a larger AoE and hits straight down instead of to the front. It's cool how without exceed, Nero's force is pushing the sword down, but with exceed, Red Queen is leading the way. While in Devil Trigger, your Red Queen attacks get an extra claw attack applied to them. This is one of Nero's sword formation equivalents, which just adds more to his attacks. Additionally, while in DT, shooting your gun also shoots out these spinning swords. Unlike Bringer Claw, this is tied to the input and not the animation, meaning you can input it whenever you want. You can also do that with Buster input, which instead does Bringer Knuckle. Now, you can press 3 additional buttons after every attack, which is way too much to handle and is fucking stupid to play with, but it speaks to Nero's character with how he always takes on more than he can handle. It's also interesting to compare this to Dante's sword formation, which happens in the background with you being in full control of what the swords do by swapping what style you're in. Whereas with Nero, you are haphazardly trying to time 3 separate button presses and trying to keep up with your regular attack moves. The cool thing about these is that you can input them right after a taunt, which feels great. Ignoring the damage they can do, Bringer Knuckle also has great utility since it can stop the enemies from being flung away from you, which leads to smoother gameplay. I think it's cool how you can either embrace Nero's inexperience and use all the moves available, or you can embrace Nero's growth and use his tools more efficiently, focusing more on quality. Blue Rose has 3 real moves. You can shoot your regular weak bullets, you can shoot your color up shots which deal noticeably more damage, or you can charge for a while and do a charge shot. Realistically, you want to charge up all the time and then blast with a max power shot, but color up isn't terrible to use alongside that max charge shot. You can charge blue rose in the background at any moment, so your gun button is basically always pressed down as an alternative to the summon sword spam playstyle, and it speaks to Nero's character yet again with how he will put more strain on himself just to try to squeeze out an advantage. Taunts are really interesting with Nero compared to Dante. Dante is in full control, therefore he taunts. Nero, however, gains some semblance of control through his taunts. In one way, by trying to convince the enemy that he is in control, and in another way, by having his taunts give him some way to manage his resources consistently. For example, when playing as Nero, your exceed state is all over the place. You consume 1 level with every attack, gain 1 with every X act, consume all with any directional move, and gain all with max act, and the odds are objectively terrible on this. Depending on if you have exceed, your red queen moves change speed, which also changes the exceed timing. By taunting in midair, you give yourself a consistent and stable window to gain exceed that will always be the same, no matter what exceed level you're currently in. This also lets you stay in the air longer, which lets you take a breather and dodge attacks, regaining control of a situation that might have been stacked against you. Nero's regular taunts give you some direction. If you didn't know what to do, you could press the taunt button and see where you go from there. Maybe you get some extra exceed, which lets you quickly start a rapid onslaught, or you stylishly unload your blue rose bullets. Maybe you put on your hood and are challenged to not enter DT just to show off. While Dante taunts because it's fun, acting as an in-between for his next move, which Nero could also do, certain taunts for Nero act as a bridge to help you play better, by connecting what you are currently doing to something that you could do, whereas Dante either already knows what he's going to do, or is being reactive. Nero's recovery taunt speaks to his inexperience. You unlock it by killing the Hell Judeca in the credit scene, and as a reward, you get a taunt that heals you. In overcoming this challenge, you gain a backup plan for when things go awry, which shows us how Nero is growing into a more consistent Devil Hunter in real time. All characters have a way to use their EX provocation safely. V has his summons, Virgil has Mirage Blades, Dante has the Little Guy, Man in the Red, and Interceptor. Nero has nothing of the sort, and any similar output would cause him to interrupt the taunt with the related attack. However, Nero can hold. Unlike the aforementioned characters who can use their taunts freely, Nero has to force the enemy into watching him taunt by grabbing them by the neck and creating his own timing, or by waiting for some ungodly long downtime. This leads to a less cool and more forced taunt, which speaks to his character since he doesn't have the means or experience to make large openings outside of forcing them to happen. As for the taunt itself, it's very awkward. It doesn't have any of the qualities the other taunts have. It's just a weird little dance he does while he vaguely hums a song he kind of remembers. It's very disappointing. It feels like Nero's real X taunt is his guitar taunt, since that one is cooler and better, but you can't guarantee that you get the guitar taunt. You have to bet on terrible odds to get it, in the same way that Nero bets on terrible odds to win. Nero can't guarantee the best provocation the way Dante does. It's a gamble, just like the rest of his kit, and that makes it better. Rainbow is one of Nero's best taunts and is on par with Air Taunt despite it being objectively worse. Nero has so many moves in his kit and so many ways to close the distance between an enemy, but choosing to run and kick with both legs is by far the worst yet coolest way to start a fight or finish one. The lock-on taunt shows how Nero takes things very seriously, with the S-rank lock-on taunt being him getting upset, as opposed to Dante's lock-on taunt giving utility and showing his playful side. If we make a connection between the style ranking and the character's emotional state, we can take Dante's lock-on taunt to mean that he's having fun and enjoying himself, playing around and throwing a rose at the enemy. Nero, however, is upset, maybe upset at his own strength for having the battle take so long. I choose a different interpretation, which is that Nero's anger is him letting out what he usually keeps inside. Nero is very emotional, and although a lot of these emotions are founded in kindness, his outlet is anger. He wants to protect his family, so he beats the shit out of them to make them see him as a capable person who can be there for him. His anger is how he expresses himself. As he is fighting for longer, he is feeling more. He is expressing himself fully instead of closing himself off as this edgy outcast. I don't think his anger is as negative as it would be for a regular person, but rather more freeing to him. I'd like to mention some breakers, like the punchline ride skill, which is the best way for Nero to do stylish moves that doesn't deal much damage. This functional taunt speaks a lot to how Nero's worldview is more fun and open compared to the others. Instead of letting his arm come back to where it's meant to go, he just jumps on it because it looks cool. It's a cool evolution of the sitting move he does that he copied off Dante, this time with his own twist on it. The gun button flings enemies in the air while the attack button brings you with them. The breaker button brings you higher, which lets you do different spins with the attack button and a directional input. If you hold forward while doing this, Nero flips too much and falls while the rocket flies away. Tomboy is really cool with how it essentially maxes out the exceed gauge while it's active, but is so hard to control that you can't lock on while using it and you're essentially being pulled along while the sword does its own thing. This is a cool way to show Nero giving up control for power in the most straightforward way. A mistake I always end up doing while using Tomboy is that I hold on to my habit of keeping the gun button held down, which locks me into the Tomboy big gun attack that I always get hit during. This move is really cool because it's one of Nero's few ways to deal range damage. Prior to DMC4, Nero cared about fighting at range since it was safer and cleaner. We don't see that habit anymore since Nero started enjoying combat and got more used to his demonic side, which is fitted to more close quarters combat. He's even got a bunch of wrestling moves now, not to mention Snatch. Because of his newfound appreciation for close quarters combat, he only ever uses his gun to stagger, deal decent damage once in a while, or as a means to use his summon swords. There's a decent amount of ranged options with the other breakers, but Tomboy's giant rail cannon is the funniest way to hit enemies from afar, and allows for some cool connections to be made with how Devilbringer was a means to an end, power for him to protect, while Devil Breakers are how he has fun with his fights. Helter Skelter is funny since it speaks to how if something doesn't work the first time, Nero is just willing to go again and again. Rawhide tells us a bit about how Nero approaches confronting many enemies at once, by hitting all of them at the same time, and bringing enemies that are further away into the fun. He's clearly biting off way more than he can chew just because he can and wants to. A cool thing about Devil Breakers is that you can break them on command to give yourself some iframes, cancel any non-buster attack, even in DT, and move on to the next breaker. I personally think it would make more sense if Nero could actively switch between breakers, because Nero isn't the type to carefully plan out his magazine for the upcoming enemies. He's the type to either use whatever is there, as if to bet on getting the right breakers, or choose which breaker fits the current scenario in a freestyle way of fighting. The biggest takeaway for Nero is that his base kit has very little defensive utility, which speaks to his inexperience. Dante is the legendary devil hunter and is bound to pick up a few ways to keep himself safe while also retaliating with counters. Virgil's entire identity is themed around protecting himself and being perfect, so he also has a decent amount of defensive utility. Nero, on the other hand, has 3 real options: table hopper, shuffle, and hold. Nero doesn't think he needs more than that, which speaks to his overconfidence and inexperience. If anything goes wrong, he can just go berserk and DTE or break his arm and create an opening for him to attack and overwhelm who he's fighting. I also think it's cool how his few defensive options have him dance around attacks right before they hit, with him barely scraping by with the only reward being some DT, no royal gauge or concentration bar. It encourages going for special interactions instead of regular responses, which makes sense since it ties his combat style to that previous open-minded theory I mentioned before, where he won't really go for the regular combat flow and instead divert into his own style, going for long animations through busters or breaking defenses with DTE, at times even breaking his arm for breakage attacks that kick ass. One of the problems with playing Nero is that you are bound to miss an X-act or you mistime your bringer knuckle and perform a snatch, which feels bad, but speaks to Nero's character, as he is clearly not fully in control and in over his head, betting on his odds to hit that X-act and improvising for when he doesn't. Another cool thing is that unlike Dante, who can essentially always stay locked on and doesn't need to remove the lock-on outside of facing the other way to look cool, Nero has to constantly remove his lock-on to perform busters or breaker moves, as if to remove his control over the fight in order to focus more on himself to use moves he couldn't otherwise, since while locked on, the buster and breaker moves perform snatch. Before we talk about SDT itself, we need to lay out some ground rules. Firstly, it isn't Sin Devil Trigger, but Shin Devil Trigger, meaning something along the lines of True Devil Trigger. We see this true form live up to Dante with Quad S and how it perfectly encapsulates his style of fighting, as well as with Virgil, who has his base power increased to its true form. Gameplay-wise, the SDT bar needs to be full for it to be used and has to come with a move that expends the entire SDT bar as a way to finish off the fight in a cool way. I personally don't think Nero's SDT should be a form change like Dante or Virgil, but instead a meter where you use a certain amount of it to perform different levels of a certain attack. I'm biased and want this attack to be a buster, maybe an interactable buster or a super fuck you attack like a souped up rainbow with a bunch of extra stuff on it, Something of note is that with the SDT button comes the quick swap nature, which means the DT button is always held down to prepare for the next SDT transformation. Nero already has this. You ideally want to always have access to his DT explosion, so having the DT button held down for a form change would go against DTE and the impact it has for Nero's character. Although I can see a universe where having to choose between keeping your hand off DT to have access to DTE or holding it down for SDT could add to his resource management and quick decision making, akin to getting a max act you didn't expect to get. Another thing that comes with SDT is the lack of visual emphasis on scales and flesh in favor of a focus on a more metallic look, and even their face and body structure changing entirely. I don't want to see Nero in that form. His regular DT form is about not hiding himself, laying himself bare to visually show that he is trying to accept every part of himself. It's a huge glow up from his DMC4 counterpart, so seeing him lose that form in search of this metallic aggressive look would defeat the purpose of the amazing themes in his regular DT. Another thing to come with SDT is hyper armor, or in Virgil's case, super armor. Nero's busters are always able to be interrupted by an attack from an outside enemy and get in the way quite often, and changing the way that works by giving the buster high-level interruption resistance during these cutscenes would be nice. The various ways I can see this play out is that you can use the D-pad, or 1 through 4, as a way to make busters more interactable during the cutscenes, or have the buster button be held and released in order to charge up the next buster attack. Visually, the only change I want to see is the blue and red color scheme as well as the Devilbringer look being added to the legs. I think this would open up some cool kick move opportunities for Nero, building on top of Rainbow with stuff like Baphomet or Alto Angelo buster animations. My personal favorite Nero moves are the ones that use his legs, so I'd love to see more of that. When it comes to story-wise, we see Nero very closely associated with losing and feeling inferior, but we already saw him choosing to fight against what everyone else is telling him to do and pursue more power in order to follow his ideals. So it's kind of hard to think about a story-related reason for Nero to search for more power. He had his SDT moment at the end of DMC5, so I really only see him pursuing more power as a way to display his own sense of style in combat. His busters currently are either a show of overconfidence in order to blast an enemy, or a way to interrupt the enemy with his own attack. If he were to further pursue in his combat style, I think this would be a great way to complement his already existing SDT. I'll be talking about music next, but please understand that I've got shit for brains when it comes to symbolism, so my interpretation of the songs might not be the same as yours. If you're interested in more than just Nero's music, check out this video, which covers all 4 DMC5 battle themes. The image that these lyrics give me isn't a winning fight. It's an uphill battle. The line, "the damage done, the pain subsides," feels like it's in first person, to show that the fight currently happening isn't a sweep, but Nero still has the balls to proudly proclaim that he'll still win. His overconfidence is speaking, rooted in how he knows his weakness more than anyone else, and he still tries to feign control so that he can squeeze out a win. "I'll never kneel" here is more metaphorical than physical. We've seen Nero kneel plenty of times, but he doesn't want to stay down. When given a choice, he will choose to get up, even if he doesn't always have the strength to fight back. I think the word choice for that last line is important. It's not a proclamation of dominance or overwhelming victory, it's merely succeed, as if merely succeeding is hard enough. For Nero, this is great. He doesn't deserve a full dominating victory yet. He doesn't have the experience or mastery to achieve that. He has his hands full with just trying to win by only betting on himself, and the odds are terrible, but he'll still somehow manage to squeeze a win, though not always. The failure is extremely important. Nero would be a worse character if he dominated everything the way Dante did. First, I'd like to mention the lines "just kneel" and "just bow." I see 2 interpretations here. The first is that this is Nero's inner psyche, egging him to give up because it's easier, but his hard-headed personality choosing to ignore that so that he can still fight. We see Nero lose plenty of times, so this concept of him getting used to failing and considering staying down isn't foreign, but it makes his choice to continue to fight that much more impactful. A different way to look at it is by assuming this is Nero hoping for his enemy to give up. Nero is very emotional and anger is a large part of that, but he's not violent and battle crazy, so his enemy surrendering is a great alternative, and probably what he's inwardly wishing for. When it comes to the main lyrics, a fallen angel makes me think of an angel who has sinned and was kicked out of heaven. I interpret this as Nero seeing himself as an angel capable of the same good things that the people around him are, but some part of him has sinned and metaphorically fell from heaven. I interpret this as him judging himself and being extremely critical, pointing out the faults and not recognizing his strengths, considering himself born an angel, like everyone else, but falling from heaven just for being himself. The rest of the lyrics bring that concept of a hard-won fight back, though this time instead of being led by a theme of losing and getting back, it's instead themed as this unearned confidence, as though Nero is pretending to have full control over the fight, as if he'd been winning all along, yet again focusing on making the enemy feel like they have no control, instead of being in full control. The first and last line are what I'd like to focus on. This figurative army is his will to fight back, his iron will to try again. The other line gives us more context. Nero has lost. A lot. Not just temporary setbacks like Dante, but full losses. His will isn't built on confidence, it's built on failure. He has had every right and opportunity to accept his losses and just give up. But instead, he feeds into his self-hatred and picks himself back up. He'll fall and fall and fall again, and eventually he'll decide he's had enough and blast his way to victory in the most stupid and Nero way possible. What I like about this part is that the first three lines use I will and you will, while the last line is a solitary I. I interpret this as Nero making a promise. No matter what, he'll push through and somehow manage to win. Even if you kick his ass over and over again, he won't stay down, even taunting his enemy despite not being in a position to. The last line is how he views himself. His determination and iron will make him a force to be reckoned with. He's not undefeatable and cool like Dante. He's a failure, who will keep failing until his enemies find themselves losing to his unshakable will. He's not perfect and he's not all-powerful. This line isn't a promise to do anything like the other lines. This is just an observation of how, despite him never being enough, he still tries and fights, an existence that can make an angel scream and a devil cry. This line never repeats again. It just faintly plays in the background. I see this to mean that this line is bouncing inside of Nero's head, like a promise he never wanted to break, yet did repeatedly. This part feels very forced. It's not Nero wanting to do something or making promises. It's him having to do something. I connect this to his relation with Yamato. He doesn't care much for the sword itself, but he doesn't want it to be gone. It's the only thing giving him strength. He needs it, not wants it. In a similar manner, his quest for vengeance in DMC5 isn't so much because this is what he wants and enjoys doing, but it's what he needs to do. He has to get Yamato back. He's nothing without it. He has to go. He has to be fast and defeat Urizen. He has no other option. Additionally, the final line brings attention to something I haven't really mentioned yet. I've called Nero soft and emotional, but I haven't fully expressed his rage. Nero gets angry. A lot. He has a lot to be angry about, but the only thing he really hates is himself. When Agnus kills him, he's not enraged, but when Agnus takes Kyrie, he completely loses his shit. This does not change across the games. The only thing that changes is that he hides it. The rage that stems from self-loathing is the only thing keeping him going. When he's not angry, he gives up, and when he is angry, he keeps pushing. This is something only Kyrie understands. Only she tells him to keep pushing, because that's what Nero does. We see an amazing contrast in the next part, where the lyrics change from can't control to can't resist, which speaks to how Nero is accepting more of himself in 5, embracing not just his demonic side, but also his anger. His rage is a large part of him, but it doesn't have complete control over him, which is important because Nero is very lenient with giving up control in search of power, but he won't give up control to his anger. His rage is a great part of his character that adds more to him instead of defining him. Now, we see him change his outlook on the situation. He's no longer forced to do things. This is him embracing his anger and feelings and accepting more of himself. Throughout this ordeal, he's been given a lot to think, but also a lot to feel. Of these feelings, his rage, for one, is a large part of him. However, it's different now from before. This isn't a blind, forced rage. This is frustration built on all his failures. He's not upset at losing Yamato. He's upset that he's nothing without it. Every bit of frustration and inadequacy all building up to that final moment where he trusts his feelings without letting them take full control. His thoughts running wild with his body trying to hold back the absurd amount of feelings he has, leading up to a final culmination where all three align, leading up to him obtaining the power he always sought, the power that was in him all along. The final part tells us that despite accepting himself, he still sees it as an imperfection. No matter how strong he is, he will never see himself as anything more than a devil. As third parties, we see Nero as soft and kind, but Nero sees himself as a self-centered outcast. He only moves for who he cares about, not caring for everyone equally the way Kyrie does. His power is a part of himself, and therefore wicked, a wickedness he still chose to accept, which lets him make those same taunts he used to, though this time they're more akin to promises. The song now takes a more ecstatic theme, going back to those taunts and promises we saw in Never Surrender, though this time they don't imply an uphill battle. Nero now has all the power he needs, so he's just enjoying himself. He's done with all the losing battles. He's done with keeping his feelings down. He's done holding back. The final bit is probably just a reference to M20 instead of Nero as a whole, with him getting to know his father by giving him the finger of wholesome and kind. The fight is Nero showing Virgil that he's capable of being there for him, the same way he was there for V, expressing his feelings, both the hatred and the love, through a lovely family interaction. One last thing I'd like to mention that I have no proof of is that during the S-rank Devil Trigger music transition, I always hear what comes and what follows, which is interesting. We always see Nero connected with being stuck in the past, only thinking about his failures and mistakes. I could just be completely making shit up here, but I think it's cool to point out that the Nero we see only thinking about the past is the Nero we see prior to Mission 20, and the Nero that's moved on and is looking ahead is the Nero after Mission 20. In a similar sense, Devil Trigger, the song, only really hits after your first playthrough, and I personally think Sin Devil Trigger better encapsulates Nero's story in DMC5. The themes in Sin Devil Trigger make more sense regarding Nero's mental state in the events of 5, especially how that one part at the end, where the funeral instrument plays, I have no idea what it's called, encapsulates Nero's first DT transformation. I prefer SDT the song over Bass DT, but I think the original version better encapsulates Nero having moved forward and past his previous mistakes, having grown as a person through accepting himself fully, while SDT better encapsulates his journey to that point. Something that I want to bring attention to in this song is the use of pronouns here. You are not alone. I will be here. We will be as one. You will rise again. My interpretation of this song is that it's Nero's inner demon talking to him, a part of himself that's always been ignored and looked down on, yet it sounds comforting. Think back to when I pointed out how Nero's tear marks are red. I think this is similar because it shows how his demonic side is supporting him, with his human side making the decisions. Nero is being told to push further and keep trying, being encouraged to trust himself and just go for it, because Kyrie and his own self will be there for him no matter what. Legacy, for me, is Nero's tenacity to keep pushing. Something I want to mention is that Nero isn't perfect. He has given up, and he knows that. When faced with the same decision, encouraged and almost forced to give up, he chooses not to. He already gave up before. He won't choose the easy way anymore. To me, his legacy isn't him succeeding after failing. It's him continuing to try. Nero's true Devil Trigger isn't a means to an end. It's a path to more options. It's not a way for him to express his stylish side or make himself more powerful constantly at no cost. It's a way to cancel what he's doing so he can do more. It's a way to expand his horizons to more possibilities. Nero doesn't unlock a way to end the fight instantly. He unlocks a way to fight in his own style. Dante and Virgil like to stay in DT for longer to fully utilize it, but Nero likes to pop in and out of it. To me, Nero's legacy isn't the height of the mountain he will overcome, but the action of rising. This one is less about Nero himself and more about how the games, specifically DMC4, show Nero's mentality without saying anything. I'll be using Black Clover to compare, but you don't need to have watched it to understand. Minor spoilers ahead. In Black Clover, we are shown time and time again how Asta is an outcast because he has no magic. We are shown how the public treats him and the ridicule he gets for something he was born with and had no choice in. We are told that people don't like Asta, but we are shown that he doesn't care. You could argue that this helps build Asta's character by showing how he pushes himself to new heights through unwavering perseverance, but we already know that from a lot of other scenes. In a similar but opposite way, Devil May Cry rarely talks about how Nero as a boy was always ostracized for being an orphan. They don't show anyone doing it, they don't mention it much, and it heavily contrasts how Black Clover puts the prejudice in your face while DMC barely mentions it. The way I see it, Black Clover fails here. because by putting so much attention on a non-issue, with the actual reaction to it being something we already know through the other interactions with the character, the entire topic as a whole falls flat. For Nero, however, it's the opposite. By not putting any emphasis on the thing itself, we as the player or reader are instead focusing on its impact on the character. In Nero's case, it matters a lot. He doesn't want to be alone, but he thinks he has no choice. The only one he can even hate is himself because of his self-depreciating worldview. Additionally, because he has so much weight attached to being alone, it puts into the context just how much it means to him when he says he'll endure the exile, and how much he hates himself for not living up to that later on. We never see Nero fully stop caring about how other people see him. We get a decent look at this when Dante calls him deadweight and when he asks Nico if she thinks he's a demon. He still cares, but a lot less now than he used to. The reason for this is because Kyrie is egging him on not to care, because other people's views on him don't change who he is. I find it really cool how by not putting emphasis on one thing, you passively place emphasis on another, which helps build the characters and their relationship together so much better than if you were to make it absurdly clear to the person absorbing the media that thing A is important because it leads to thing B, which is relevant to the character. By placing emphasis passively instead of directly, you also create a trait that adds to the character instead of defining them, making them feel more complete. Mission 20 in DMC5 is called True Power, which I found interesting since you'd expect that title to go to Mission 12. I think Nero deserves it though, and although I'm absolutely biased, I'm absolutely right, because my boy deserves everything. So the Devil Trigger form has always been tied to weapons. In the first game, Dante can't use DT before Alastor, and his DT form changes depending on whether Alastor or Ifrit is equipped. In DMC3, this is pushed further, because both Dante and Virgil's DT form have different looks depending on the weapon they're using. In DMC4, Nero only gets his DT after he gets Yamato. Dante and Virgil also obtain their DT with the help of their Devil Arms. V only gets his DT after obtaining Nightmare, and Dante's SDT is with Devil Sword Dante. Even at the beginning of DMC5, we see Dante go into Devil Trigger with the help of Devil Sword Sparta after he got kicked out of DT because Rebellion broke. Although Dante and Virgil might not need a Devil Arm to use DT, they really prefer using them because it's presumably easier for them to rely on their weapon's innate demonic energy over supplying their own. This makes Nero's DT that much more impactful, and it explains why Virgil responds with,
What form of power is this?
when Nero stops him. Nero doesn't care about the foundations of Devil Trigger, he just wants to embrace every part of himself and gain the strength he needs to fight for what he wants to protect. And if that means breaking the foundation that these seemingly unstoppable beings still follow, then so be it. It also gives his fuck you more meaning, since it's not just him retaliating against his father, but also their own nature, showing how he prefers to do things his own way. At the start of M19, Dante's first words to Virgil after the climb up are,
Hey, Virgil! Your portal opening days are over. Give me the Yamato.
I think it's important that Dante puts emphasis on the sword here, not Virgil. In Dante's point of view, the sword belongs to Nero, because he needs the sword. From this, I believe that Dante is possessive of Nero, treating him less like a person and just as his family. He sees Nero as a resource, the only one left of its kind. He's had his father disappear, his mother killed, and thought he killed his brother in 2 separate occasions. Nero is all Dante has left, so he doesn't see Nero as a person until it gets backhanded into his skull in a way he can't just ignore. This possessiveness is why he calls Nero deadweight. Dante doesn't care if Nero can achieve anything he wants with encouragement. He doesn't want Nero to be anywhere near danger due to the risk of losing him. Dante doesn't want Nero to be involved because Nero isn't a person with motivations and feelings to him. He's a resource. When Nero gets his feelings across, Dante finally sees him for the person he is and what he's capable of, leaving the overworld for him to protect so he can follow his brother to hell in order to not repeat his past mistakes. The deadweight insult wasn't just Dante calling Nero a loser, it was Dante rejecting Nero's entire existence, which is why Nero calls Dante deadweight without even looking at him, as if to pay it forward. I'm really disappointed that Nero doesn't get to keep his headphones from 4, and there's no mod for it either. I think it would be cool for Nero's music to affect his gameplay in some way, and an idea I had was to have 2 different breaker magazines you can swap to at any time, which give you different buffs depending on which you have equipped. For example, one that rewards having little time between attacks, and another that rewards getting table hop or parries, including interrupting an attack with a buster. These two magazines would play different kinds of music, and while at SSS you get the benefits of both magazines while gaining access to a third breaker magazine, as well as some sort of mixture of both. Bringing this back to headphones, you can tell which mode you're in based on which part of the headphones would be on the ear, and during SSS, the headphones would be fully on. This wouldn't be the main way to know which mode you're on, just a cool gimmick while the actual UI is in the bottom right. A lot of Nero's moves are named after gambling terms, which makes sense, since he bets his victory on dogshit odds he expects to hit. Nero is either ambidextrous or right-handed, since he was carving the blue rose engraving with his right hand. He shows exceptional skill in using his left hand, but when it comes to carving or massaging Kyrie, he prefers to use his right hand, if not both.